two, one. Hello, everybody. We made it. Sorry for the slight delay. It seems like there were some technical difficulties with LinkedIn. That's what caused the slight delay, but maybe we could think of it as we've added a little bit of suspense, because the topic is hot. So let's all prepare for what we're going to be discussing today. Uh, for those who don't know me, my name is Filip Hric. I'm from Slovakia. I work for an awesome company called Replay as a DevRel, developer relations. I've been enjoying it very much since September. We're building a time traveling debugger and dev tools, which is awesome for your flaky tests. Well, not for them because they're going away, but it's awesome for fixing them. And here with me is Jonathan. Jonathan, please introduce yourself.
Awesome. Well, I'm actually very upset with you, Philip. I think it's been over 6 months since I've done a live stream with you, so I don't know why it's been so long. I think every time we have these discussions, it normally gets a little spicy. So of course, we're having this one together today. My name is Jonathan Canales. I'm a senior solutions engineer at Checkly, right, which is a synthetic monitoring platform where you can reuse your Playwright tests for monitoring your assets in production, which is really fun. I also do some work with Philip over at Replay, which is a really great solution that helps you essentially replay your tests and interact with them as if they were still live, which is super fun. I'm excited to be with you here today and talk about these things, Philip.
I'm excited too. So, big news 2 days ago. Actually, you told me, and then we started posting that online that the it seems like inevitable has happened, and Playwright has been continuing on their growth, and as NPM trends tell us, they have over they got ahead of Cypress in weekly downloads, which is an interesting number. It says something. It does not tell the whole story, and we can discuss that today. But it is an interesting moment. And I'm getting a feedback that Jonathan should turn up his mic, so I'm going to do that for you actually, because I'm in
Oh,
control
thank you.
of
You
everything.
see, you see how Philip treats me? We haven't even started the call yet, and my mic has already
Yeah,
been turned down.
yeah,
This is
no,
this is what he does to me on these live
I
streams.
I can mute you.
I'll be good, I promise.
No worries, no worries. So yeah, interesting moment, right? Playwright has overcome Cypress. The question is, how did we even get here? Like, Playwright has been on this crazy growth, but maybe let's focus on Cypress for a moment, because I think the growth of Cypress has sort of slowed down. I believe it's still growing, but it has slowed down, and let's discuss why that is.
Yeah, I think, if we put this into perspective, right? Cyprus has had explosive growth over the course of the last 5 years, and it's been extremely steady at the same time. And what's really cool when you look at the growth of Cyprus over that amount of time is that you can almost look at major releases and how they've led to steady growth year after year after year. And there's also something to be said, I think, from looking the outside in, is we're almost at 6 million downloads a week with Cypress and Playwright, at the same time. That just has never been the case before, right? So there's something to be said about what we're seeing in the industry in general, right? With test engineering, automation really taking up as much space as it should and having the sort of attention on it as it should. People are testing, right? That was kind of the whole point of Cypress, like making testing easier for developers to do, really letting developers take the keys here. And then to me, it's no surprise that we're also seeing Playwright take off. It's a very, obviously developer focused tool, performs really great in CI. And here we are. They're both getting about the same amount of weekly downloads, and people love both these tools.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I have been saying as well. That Cypress has brought a lot of developers closer to testing, and it has brought a lot of testers closer to development, because as a side effect of Cypress being built, uh, it would happen to you as a tester. It was certainly my story coming from a non-technical background, that I was sort of forced to become more technical and to understand the application that I'm testing a little bit more. So that I think was kind of interesting, at least for me. It has. Uh,
Absolutely. This, I hate to pose questions and things like this, but I'm sort of curious, right? Like, as we've kind of seen this trend over the course of the last 2 years with Playwright, last 5 years with Cypress, you know, who owns testing now, right? Do we see that developers, like software engineers, maybe true software engineers, if we want to use those sorts of titles, do we see that those people and those types of organizations have a higher affinity for Playwright over maybe organizations that have a more QA sort of minded focus, right? Are we seeing uh, people in one camp or another prefer a certain type of tool? I can tell you what I'm seeing, but I'm super curious as to maybe Philip, what you've been seeing in the industry.
yeah, I've been at the end of April. I've been to Star East in Orlando, and I've been trying to do the DevRel work and build relationships with as many people as I could. And I've talked to many people. And to when I was at the airport leaving Orlando, I was kind of trying to remember all the conversations I had, and there was one thing that sort of stood out to me, and that was that everyone was getting more technical. Like in the QA world, in like the pure QA engineers testing world, you often meet people that are like great analysts that can dive deep into the business logic. They can understand like different test cases, but they're not really involved with the code, or they don't really care whether the application is written in React or in Vue or Angular, whatever. They're there to analyze the business impact and the risks. And that's great, that's important. But I think that getting technical is going to be really important in upcoming years. If I can mention the dirty word in the world of AI, right? AI
Oh,
being the dirty word.
whew.
With the rise of AI, like what's the biggest problem right now, and I think it's going to be continuing to be the biggest problem, right? If AI gives you some sort of answer, you need to check it. You need to validate it. You're still a tester for the AI. You still need to make sure that the answer you've got is the one you wanted. And for that to happen, you need to have a good technical understanding of what's going on. So that's why I think it is important. And I have seen on the conference, and I've seen this a lot of times already, that testers, QAs are getting more technical. They are getting into the nitty gritty. They do have the knowledge. They're learning new things, and I love to see that movement. And I think that's already happening in the companies. Sometimes it happens in not so nice ways when the QA department is getting dissolved, but sometimes there's a natural progression of all the QA team getting more technical, getting more into test automation, maybe even contributing to the source code, but still having that tester's mindset. And that's also something that's happening on the other side with developers. They also gather this testing mindset. They think about the business, they think about the end user, the whole shifting left and shifting right. I think that's something we see in current companies, and honestly, I love to see that.
Yeah, I would say, from my seat right now, right, working in for a synthetic monitoring solution where we're using Playwright for, browser checks, user flows, and multi-step API checks and things like that. What I see more frequently when I'm going to, conferences, whether they're SRE ops related conferences or like First Cell Ship just a few weeks ago, The folks that I'm talking to are all extremely technical, right, and are coming from a very different side of the aisle here on the QA automation side. And so what we're frequently seeing is that engineers are owning quality in production, right? So to them, it's more about how can I say, being able to have a framework that you can use throughout multiple points of your software development lifecycle. But not only that, right? It's something everyone can understand and use. So if developers or ops people are primarily leveraging Playwright because it's not as expensive to run in CI, all that kind of stuff, right? It covers what they're looking to do. The whole organization is going to move to that space because that's the primary use case now. That's the most practical one. So I'm definitely seeing a lot more of that, but I'm definitely also a little biased because the organization that I work for leverages Playwright so heavily. But at the same time, you would never, I'm going to look around my shoulder here real quick. You would never want to run Cypress as a synthetic monitoring tool just because it's so heavy to use, right? Yeah. Using double XL large machines to ping an endpoint all the time is just not something you'd ever want to do.
I mean, there's also the architectural problem with Cypress where the architectures are just so different, and how Cypress approaches the browser is as a result, it's harder to get it integrated into like a larger system. So that's there as well.
I think that's a really great call out, right? Because that's Cypress's superpower is that when it's running your application, it's actually running your application in the browser's context. So when something fails, you're literally seeing it the exact same way your user would without any sort of black magic, because it's in the browser context. But that also comes with its own costs. And I think organizations are having to make that choice. I definitely know quite a few that are deciding to use both tools and like it that way. They prefer it that way. They use the tools for different and very different use cases, which is cool.
Yeah, I agree there. Let's take a look at the graph at the topic at hand. So I'm going to share my screen now. And by the way, I think like there's something weird going on with I don't want to say your face, but your picture, and I don't know why that is, but I'll give myself a moment to figure it out after we look at this graph, cool. Because now that I switched screens, it's much better. You have much better picture now. And I don't know why that is. Why was that happening when we were?
Sometimes my face is weird. I'm okay with it.
Yeah,
it's something that happens.
But it wasn't that. Anyways, yeah. So this is where we are at. So we have Cypress, we have Playwright, and we see this this orange line sort of going up and catching up with Cypress over past couple of days, weeks. So now we see the orange line being over the blue line. We've got some other tools we can take a look into: WebDriver.io, maybe Puppeteer. By the way, Puppeteer is interesting because it's the green line. Oh, it has gone down because there was a interesting thing going on. Like last year, you would already hear people say, "Oh, Cypress is dead. Let's move to Playwright." And I almost tweeted out, Playwright is dead. Let's move to Puppeteer because that seems to have the most downloads. Not the reality anymore. But what's also interesting, I want to point out, if you take a look at 5 years ago, there you can see like how those lines progressed. And Cypress and Playwright the project did started around the same time. I believe there's like a 1 year difference. But what's really interesting is this growth that started happening in September. And I already got on my original LinkedIn post, someone mentioned that, actually it was David Burns from Selenium. He mentioned that, it's kind of suspicious that since September, this growth has been so crazy. Is there anything going on? Is there another package that is using Playwright in the background, and maybe that's what skewing the results here? And I don't have the definite answer. The growth is kind of crazy, and if you look at the trend, it does change a lot since last year. That's for sure. Whether that is caused by some other factor, I'm not sure, because NPM, as far as I know, when they put together their numbers, they are aware of like bots and multiple downloads and stuff like that. So they try their best to make sure that those numbers are correct. So what we are looking at should be correct numbers, and if they are correct, which I'm assuming they are, it is kind of crazy how Playwright has managed to grow so fast, and but it is an impressive tool. So I'm not inclined to like not believe that this is what's happening, and especially like since last year when you couldn't open a page and not hear about Playwright. So I don't know. What do you think?
Exactly. I think what you were kind of touching on there at the end is important, right? I think for the last few years, even while I was at Cypress, we were seeing quite a few people in the community and some pretty large companies like start looking at Playwright pretty seriously as a contender for what they want to run in CI for, their global operations, like all of their software development, right? So we know that these conversations and these decisions have been taking place for quite some time. I think what we're seeing is just a natural extension of that, right? More organizations have had the time to really take a look at Playwright as a fully fledged automation tool, as an automation solution that is viable, and orgs are making, recommendations left and right on what they want to adopt. I think what we've also seen during this same period of time, right, and it's important that we touch on this, I think, is there have been a massive amount of layoffs, right, in QA and SREs and software development in general. So it all of a sudden becomes more important that especially really large organizations start getting behind, like, hey guys, we're going to unify our software development. We're using this one tool for this. I think if you pair that with some other things that happened during that same period of time, you start being able to put together the breadcrumbs and say, well, Playwright has these features, Cypress made some choices, and the community and the industry is moving in this direction. We haven't seen massive losses with Cypress the way that we've seen with Selenium. I think that's important to call out. Mm-hmm. I also think, kind of like you just pointed out with Puppeteer, right? We're seeing a heavy fluctuation, whereas with Cypress, we're seeing some really, really strong stability, because when organizations adopt Cypress and it's their tool of choice and it works for their use case, there's no reason to move beyond. But I think some of what we're seeing here is, again, layoffs, changes in the industry. We're seeing, if there is a time to migrate because of cost or something like that, maybe we're seeing that as well. So I've opened up quite a few different avenues for you to pivot to, Philip. So I'm sort of curious if you take any of my bait here.
I might, but I have a question. Do you think we can pinpoint on this graph the point where you left Cypress?
I think there's an argument to be made there, right? Because that would be around March. So
around March last year.
Plus 6 months. We're in September. You know what I mean? Like we're right there. So
I mean, yeah, we can see a huge dip in March here. Anyways, yeah, I mean, it is interesting to see. You know what? I'm going to try to fix your image, and I think that's slightly better now. We'll see how long that will last. All right, so yeah, I think last year was definitely a huge, like there were many sorry, there were many things that that could be attributed to this trend and to the fact that that things are changing. One of the interesting things that was happening, I'm not sure what's happening to my voice now, but one of the things that okay, that
Yeah. You take your hydration break there. Yep.
I need to do that. Yeah. Where was I? One of the things that was happening was that I have definitely seen, being a Cypress ambassador, talking about Cypress a lot, was different reactions and comments on social media, like, "Oh, we're migrating to Playwright because Cypress is so flaky, it's so unstable, we're not satisfied, it takes too long, Playwright is faster," and stuff like that. And it is really interesting to me because I've been adopting Cypress since like version, I believe, 0.20. And that's what I was saying in comparison to Selenium, right? Selenium is so flaky, it's so hard to set up, everything is so hard. Look at this new shiny tool, it's so stable, it's so fast, no more flakiness. And I mean, to be honest, I did experience a lot of test flakiness when I was using Cypress, right? I wasn't really talking about it because that doesn't really make a good content if it's like how I spent 3 hours and got nowhere, right? Nobody writes a blog post about that.
I'd read it. I'd read it, honestly. That sounds interesting to me.
Maybe I could write it. Well, I cannot write it anymore. Ha! Look at that segue.
Oh yeah, nice.
Yeah. So obviously, I'm going to mention replay, not because not because I have to or my boss told me or something like that, but it is something that I joined replay out of like a lot of enthusiasm, right? Jason reached out to me last summer. Hey, you're a Cypress ambassador. Let me know what you think about this tool. And when I finally tried it, I was like, holy hell, this is so cool. I need to, like, are you guys hiring? Because I want to join this. Because it has been an answer for a lot of my frustrations with my testing. When something happened on CI, but it ran locally, and I didn't know what. I didn't have any insight into CI. So with replay, you can sort of pick it up and examine and fix your damn flake, whether that's on the application or in the test you wrote, right? And when I look at the trend of people moving to Playwright out of that frustration, there's like this alarm in my head, like, please, come on, like, don't do the same mistake that I did, or like, don't think about your test the way I did. Because first of all, I spent a lot of time doing workshops and teaching people and answering questions online about Cypress, and there was a fair amount of misunderstanding of like how commands in Cypress work, how the chaining syntax work, and that's going to happen no matter what the tool is, right? Some people are saying Playwright is so cool, I can understand there's no black magic. I mean, there are still going to be things that are going to confuse people, right? So learning the tool that you are using in and out, that's always going to be important, right? And then having a good insight into what's happening in your test, that I would argue is even more important because, I've been part of this Applitools events, Cypress versus Playwright, which one is the best, right? And we had 6 rounds or 7 rounds and we were voting, and it was sort of a beauty contest of code. But many people drew conclusions from that, and I'm here to take the blame for that format. Although we did try as hard as we could with Andy to make sure that, hey, let's focus on the important thing. But like when you have a huge crowd or when you just read a headline, it's easy to make conclusions from that. Oh yeah, Playwright won 2 times in a row. It's definitely better. That's not really the conclusion you should make. One thing that appeared there which I thought was really interesting, was let's compare speed of execution. Playwright won that by a landslide. Even people that were in love with Cypress would never vote for Cypress in that category because it was the numbers. The numbers were clear, right?
Right.
So what happened is that I thought about this, and I thought about my day as a tester, right? So what actually takes a bigger part of my day? Is it waiting for the pipeline to finish, or debugging my tests into until I drop dead, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And it was definitely the second part, right? I mentioned it already. Like, my tests were flaky. I don't know what was happening on CI. I tried to figure it out, and that was most of my day because the testing repository was my ownership, and I had to figure out what's going on. Funny thing, when I left my previous company, they migrated to Playwright. And I need to check on them, how's it going so far, because I'm really curious about the results.
Well, there's a few things you're touching on that I think are extremely important, right? There's this idea that, over time, every test suite, if not properly maintained or actively maintained, will get to a space where it is untenable, right? Where people no longer trust the suite. But what normally happens is it's not that they don't trust the test suite, right? They end up losing trust in the framework that the test suite is running on.
Yep.
Right. I think this is a huge thing to double click on, actually, right? I wonder sometimes when organizations think about migrating to a new framework, do they also consider what would it cost us to just totally rewrite our test suite and update it to the most modern practices, where we're not using these old terrible dependencies anymore, and maybe we're moving away from POM and going to user-based flows, et cetera, or a whole different team owns testing, right? To me, what I've never seen an organization consider that, right?
Yep.
I've only ever seen organizations consider greenfield moving to an entirely new framework. And I think resoundingly what you hear after that sort of migration, right? When I was at Cypress, it was always Selenium to Cypress. And oh boy, was everyone real happy to have Cypress.
Yeah.
Now at Checkly, I'm kind of seeing the same thing. We're like, oh boy, so happy to have Playwright. Cypress was XYZ, right? But to me, again, I just kind of never see anyone say, hey, you know what? We doubled down on our original framework. We've said, we know it can be better. Let's make it better. Let's invest the time. And oftentimes, I think the other side of this coin is when they're at that point, when organizations or users are at that point where, hey, this framework's no longer cutting it for me, their test suite has gotten just so untenable that convincing them to give it another shot, right, is almost reminiscent of trying to keep someone in a bad relationship. It's just like, hey, we've both made some choices here and it's not going well anymore. Should we give it another go? The answer most of the time is no, I want to try something else at this point, right? So I see a lot of that. What do you think about that as far as maybe what your perspective has been with coaching people to adopt Cypress or new testing frameworks, et cetera? Is that ring true for you?
Yeah, definitely. And let's be honest, Cypress does have some objective limitations that if your software is one way, Cypress is probably not going to be a solution for you. And those use cases include stuff like our whole software is using multiple iframes and they all are from different domain, right? But what can we do? We need to automate this. Oh, and it's also black box and we don't know any of the code, right? That's like just imagining with the whole experience that I have, that would be a nightmare. I wouldn't want to do that, right? So I think if you decide, if any of the people watching here, if they're like verging on a decision on migrating their current test suite to something else, maybe from Cypress to Playwright, or maybe from Selenium to either Cypress or Playwright, I think it's really good to assess like what your software is, and it's easier said than done, right? Because you really get familiar with a test framework once you use it. So in a way, that migration trends, that's trying out new tools, is part of the process. And sometimes if the company has the resources and opportunity to take time and try new things and experiment, or maybe they have multiple projects and they can compare. We used Playwright here, we used Cypress there. Which works better, which ones do developers and testers like more. If that's your case, then by all means go for it, because sometimes what I see is this weird trend in some of the companies I work with. Let's stick to one tool and let's only use that, and let's not use the other tool because it will confuse developers. No, it will not. It's okay. You can experiment, right? You can have a Vue project alongside
we feel
the
differently
Angular
about
project.
this. We feel differently about this, Filip. Sorry to come over top of you there. But
that's okay.
We feel very differently about this, right? I think at the end of the day, organizations, at least the ones that I've seen, right? It's either, hey, everyone can use whatever they want, and that rolls for a specific amount of time. But over time, I think most organizations I've seen that had that initial sort of state all end up moving towards, unification around and consolidation around tools, especially when those tools have a cost, right?
Yeah.
So something that you touched on a moment ago that I think is also really important is, hey, what is our use case, right? What's important for us and what we test? And then thinking about, this Cypress Playwright sort of dynamic is, who are the tools for? Who are these solutions for, right? Yep. In my mind, where Cypress started it was for that solo developer who needed to be able to write tests quickly and didn't want to use Selenium, and they absolutely crushed that, right? And we've seen that. We wouldn't be talking about Cypress still today if that wasn't the case. But what we have seen in the last year and a half or so, right, is Cypress now moving more into this, it's an enterprise testing solution, right? We have Cypress accessibility now. And while accessibility is all of our responsibility to maintain as we create an accessible web, right? I think that it's also a much more mature use case, right? If I'm a solo dev making a portfolio, it should be accessible, but the likelihood that I'm putting in as much time and effort into that as, let's say, a top 100 Forbes organization or something like that, you just can't compare it, right? And there's pros and cons to that, I think. What do you think about that? Like the business of these automation frameworks, right? Because Playwright / Microsoft, they're in business too, and I think that's really important to call out here.
Yeah, it's interesting because like Playwright and Cypress are getting more and more similar, especially in like the business model, right? You have the open source runner, open to the community, contribute to our projects, create an issue, we'll read it, we'll work with you, etc. And then there's the enterprise thing, right? And for Cypress is Cypress Cloud, for Microsoft is the Azure Microsoft Playwright testing, I believe it is called. I went to a live stream today on Discord, on Playwright's Discord. They were showing like the newest feature where you can show like the trace viewer in a really nice dashboard kind of view. It was really interesting. But it's funny, right? Because as we've been saying, with Cypress version 12, that was like the last major update, and then it seemed like most of the team working at Cypress has moved to making improvements on Cypress Cloud. And I always kind of laugh about it, because not because I would think it's a bad move, it's a good move. I'm laughing because that's what I wished for like year and a half ago. In fact, on my YouTube channel, I would say like there was a question, there was a snippet, like what do I want from Cypress, and I like have this 5 minute rant on why I think Cypress Cloud should be much better. And it is getting better. It's getting a lot of love. It's getting a lot of attention, especially like inside Cypress, the company. Uh, and now I'm so frustrated that nothing is moving in the Cypress runner. And you know, Playwright with their team, they're releasing every second week or every third. I don't remember, but they do have like a release cycle, very periodic, and yeah, they're like getting ahead with their open source thing, right? And it doesn't seem like they have enterprise thing going on, but they just started. So we'll see how those ways are going to change over years, because it's funny how many similarities are there between these two projects. Uh, so it's also interesting that Playwright obviously is backed by Microsoft. Some people take that as a guarantee of success.
Yeah, yeah,
I always laugh about that because I don't know if you know how big companies work, but they slash projects left and right,
yep,
especially those like that don't turn profit, which again, Playwright is an open source. Uh, Currently, there are like also very impressive, by the way, only like 5 engineers working on Playwright. Uh, but as the project grows, it probably there will be a day when it will require more and more engineers, so more will be hired, and then the team of 5 will become team of 50. But will it still be the open source project? And if so, like how does it then turn profit? And if it doesn't, will it come to the day where Microsoft decides, like the top management looks down on all the projects and looks like, what is this? Let's cut it out, right?
yeah,
That could technically happen. I don't, to be honest, I don't see that happening.
yeah.
But you know, we are here in year 2024. We'll see what happens in 5, 10 years. Uh, Things are going to change, and we'll see where we land at. So
I,
it's funny to. I just wanted to point out that it's funny, like being backed by Microsoft is some sort of guarantee. It's not. It's not.
yeah, it's definitely not. But what I would say though is that there are two clear approaches happening with both of these open source tools, right? Some folks in the community are saying that Cypress is no longer open source because some of the features within the Cypress test runner, as we all know, are now paywalled, right?
Yep.
And that would be test replay. Um, and so with Cypress 13, they launched this really powerful new feature where essentially it's Playwright traces only a little bit better. Someone feel free to at me after this if you want to correct me that I'm incorrect here, but it's a trace viewer and it's really nice and it's powerful and great. But it's paywalled, right? And so there's something to be brought up here, right? Where it's like, is Cypress, it's one Cypress, right? Cypress Cloud, Cypress Test Runner, whatever other things they build will always be a part of the Cypress ecosystem. So if we look at the test runner and we compare that test runner to Playwright's test runner, where nothing is paywalled, all the features are built in and included. But what we can easily say right now is Microsoft with Azure Test Cloud, right, and Playwright Test Cloud, whatever it's called. There's two different services that they're selling right now attached to Playwright that are happening outside of the runner. And
Yeah.
I think what we've kind of learned about the community is that the tolerance for paywalling features within an open source tool is a non-starter.
Yeah.
People hate that. I think you could require users to log in and they'd probably begrudgingly do it if they could have test replay. But making it so that way the only way that they can access these features that just grant Cypress parity with already existing Playwright features is to pay. You've 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 cut off the top of your funnel, right?
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
reduced the amount of users who can use your solution at its most powerful and get value from it. And you've successfully pushed those same users to Playwright. You've
Yeah.
pushed those organizations to Playwright because they want to leverage those they want to leverage those features and they want it to be free if they're included.
Funnily enough, just yesterday an email landed in my inbox from Cypress saying that we have a free tier now. And I'm actually, I have to be honest, I don't remember if there was a free tier. I think there was.
There was.
But I think the gist of the email was like we're expanding it, we're making it more accessible. I don't know. I would have to look into some historical data, but I did get the email like, hey, we actually have a free tier. You can have 50 users in it, by the way, and I don't know, like 500 recordings monthly, weekly. I don't remember. I would have to pull it out. But and I think the reason why that email was sent is that this seems like it's not a common knowledge. Even you see me right now, right? I forgot what the free tier is. And they do have a free tier, and you can try it, and obviously it's not going to like cover the whole company, but the narrative oftentimes, at least in my comment section, is that hey, you have to pay for parallelization in Cypress, which, by the way, you don't. There are a couple of solutions for that.
I'm happy to provide some historical context. For as long as I had been at Cypress, what is now like, between the last like 4 years to 2 years ago, there has always been a free plan. And what you get on that free plan, or was, I can take a look now to see what's included, but was 500 monthly test results, and that's still the case, and 50 users, and that's great. I have the same critique I have for the free plan with Cypress as I did then, and that's Cypress has a Cypress real world app. Yeah. If you run all those tests to Cypress Cloud one time, you've used something like 300 test results just right out of the go, right? So if you run it again, you've used all the results. And that's not even you running them in CI. That's just you recording those tests and sending them to Cypress.
Yep.
And I think for you using your own infrastructure and just sending those tests somewhere, 500 test results just does not cut it. Especially if you want people to be able to use your most powerful features, you need to address this, right? Again, Playwright, I have built-in parallelization within a spec file, and I already have the trace viewer, and I don't have to pay for anything. And with Playwright, with Cypress, again, just to have the trace viewer on, I can only get 500 test results. That's not enough for me to know that I want to spend, let's look at what the monthly price is, that I want to spend $75 a month with your company. If I'm just now getting away from Selenium, or if I want to take another look at Cypress, because maybe Playwright's flaky, right? Maybe I'm having trouble with Playwright, but again, I've been kind of already paywalled, blocked off from being able to investigate further. I think that's important to call out.
I think we're sort of getting into the realm of, like, our discussion is slowly steering to how do you decide between these two frameworks, right? Because we started this discussion with the fact that, all right, we look at the NPM trends. Playwright has got ahead of Cypress. What does it mean? Does it mean we all have to migrate from Cypress to Playwright? Well, for the record, I'm going to say no. That's not what you have to do. The more, even more so, if your main problem is test flakiness, check out replay. But also, like, for the what was my point? I totally lost track now. Now that I have
tools at scale. Tools at scale.
No. I do want to take a look at the tools at scale, but I also would like to talk about like these pros and cons. We started with I started this at a couple of minutes ago when I told that like, there are objectively some projects where you don't want to use Cypress, but people are still going to be deciding on one or the other. It seems like the choice is now either Cypress or Playwright at 2024. So maybe we could look into that, because I think that many people that tuned in maybe want to have the answer to that question, because again, those lines crossed, what does it mean? So you worked at Cypress. You obviously know all the pros, maybe also all the cons. Now you work at a company that integrates Playwright heavily. What would you pick for like the biggest advantage of Playwright over Cypress, and then vice versa? Before you answer, just wait a second, because your image has gotten worse again, and I already figured out how to fix that.
I like keeping you on your toes.
Yeah. So I'm going to hopefully fix that. It means that your image will black out for a moment. I'm not even sure if people are able to hear you, but yeah, okay, you're back.
Cool. Yeah. So I think you asked a great question there, right? So from my seat, having been at Cypress and now at a company that heavily incorporates Playwright into our overall value proposition, right? Again, like synthetic monitoring across all of the environments that you care about, using Playwright for that. So essentially, you're getting double ROI, right? So your tests, you're using them in production. It's great. I think for me, the advantage of Playwright over Cypress would be almost encapsulated in exactly that, right? For me, Playwright is, like I highlighted before, it's more of a developer focused tool. And what I mean by that, again, is it's super lightweight to run in CI, right? It's extremely composable. It's easy to understand. I'm not saying Cypress isn't easy to understand, but what I am saying is that, you have some of the best, like the docs are hands down better, in my opinion, at this point. It's super easy to find what I'm looking for. It's something that, I'm working with an SRE right now for a pretty large organization. They've never used Playwright before in their life, and they got coverage over all the endpoints that they care about for their applications across the US in something like 2 weeks or less on their own, right? Like,
Nice.
That's huge. Had never used Cypress or Playwright before, had never done end-to-end testing. I obviously helped a little bit. Corey, if you're out there watching this, you're great. You did awesome. But what I will say is that I do not expect that same level of velocity with Cypress. And the reason for that is that to me, Cypress is a much more powerful tool when you're trying to debug something and you're not familiar with web development. You're not familiar with even testing. It does such a great job of showing you exactly where to pay attention and what went wrong. It's unmatched. Playwright's debugging experience just is not that great compared to Cypress. And I think that's a pretty heavy feature, right? So again, it comes back down to who's actually responsible for testing. Is it true developers and developer adjacent people that are still extremely technical?
Yep.
Or, again, I'm not picking on traditional QA folks, or is it more QA folks that have just come into software development, have just come into testing and automation and things like that? Because if that's the case, I would say go with Cypress first. And I also think that, because Cypress has been around a bit longer and has kind of like evolved organically over time, is that it's a tool that when people really get a hang of it, they get it. But I think that there's not only just some education that goes into learning how to use Cypress, but it's a culture on its own, right? Like, I think that that's very much a thing where if you're a Cypress user, you know how to use it, you know how the chaining works, right? Like you know all the little tips and tricks, but for a developer with less time to really get ingrained in what Cypress is and how to use it effectively, right?
Yeah.
I would say Playwright all day. Like, okay, cool. Use async await. You're done. Like, you're fine here. With Cypress, you literally can't do that, and that's a cheap shot. My apologies to everyone at Cypress. I'm sorry.
I think there is a plugin already for that. That's one of the things. The plugins are it's kind of wild, the ecosystem of plugins for Cypress. Like half of them are built by Gleb anyways, but uh, but that's one of the that's one of the powers, by the way, that I think Cypress should tap more into. Like at the beginning, 5 years ago, I remember Cypress was this huge, like, community driven project. Like people were talking about it, people were contributing, they were sharing tips and tricks and packages and whatnot. It was amazing, and I feel like part of that is kind of lost right now. And maybe part of this is because Cypress has moved a little bit more to the enterprise segment with, like you mentioned, that with the accessibility feature and stuff like that. But I also would like to give credit. I mean, I love Cypress as a tool. It's always going to be, I believe, my first choice. Maybe simply because I know so much about it already. But one of the thing, and I really liked this a lot, was that Cypress also brought like this new philosophy to testing. If you take a look at the documentation, I love how they did that. Like there's a whole guides section that discusses like the design of your test, the the limitations, and actually does a pretty good job of it at explaining those limitations, like not having like doing if else in Cypress is kind of hard, right? And when you try to search for that in the documentation, they go in lengths into why you shouldn't really be doing that, and give very good reasons for why you shouldn't be doing that. So it's like, oh, okay, I actually need to think about my design of tests really well. And I honestly, I would like to see a little bit more of that in Playwright community, because right now I feel like looking at the documentation or in the community as well is like, do whatever you want, go wild, right? And on one hand, it's amazing. It's amazing that you can do that, because then you can build tools on top of it, and you can do this and that. You can do anything with it. You can even build a AI device with it. Not sure if you heard, right? The Rabbit R1, the little orange box. You know,
Oh,
like,
that's Playwright related
oh
somehow?
yeah. So what they did, that is so funny. I was slapping my knees when I heard that. But basically, like, they came with some sort of lamb model. I forgot what the abbreviation stood for, but it was like you could call an Uber, or you could order a meal or something, and on the background it was just using a Playwright script to click through the page to like do the ordering. Amazing. So
That's awesome.
but
That's actually really cool.
yeah, but of course it broke every time the page changed. So that was a problem. So whatever. But yeah, like I liked. So on one hand, it is really great that you can do that. You can go wild with Cypress, with Playwright, and do kind of anything with it. But also, it is a testing tool, right? And I strongly believe that there are such things as good testing patterns and bad testing patterns.
Oh,
right?
okay.
And I think
Right.
if you're a testing tool maintainer, you should talk about good testing patterns. And I mean, I want to be fair to the community. I think they do, but I think there should be like a stronger voice. Basically, what I've seen in Cypress documentation, I would like to see in Playwright's documentation as well. Like, all right, you can do this, but also don't, you know?
Yeah, I think I both love how I love how opinionated Cypress is. Like, I think having something that you say, this is the way it is, this is what we believe, this is what our framework is supporting, right? I think that that's a very useful, powerful thing. I think it becomes difficult sometimes to hold that ground when another solution says you can do whatever you want, you know? Because sometimes those same, we'll use an example, right? Like a cardinal sin of testing, of end-to-end testing, is you shouldn't test things that are not under your control, right? But what we commonly see, right, with this world built on microservices and services that are relying on other services, that holy hell, we are always testing things that are not under our control. Yep. So if you don't, if you don't cross that line and commit that sin against end-to-end testing or testing in general, then you're going to find yourself in a place where you're in a very small box, and yeah, everything in your control seems fine, but you don't have any insight into what else is going on. And that's what I think ends up being really important. There are no true cardinal sins for testing, at least from where I'm coming from. But what there is, right, is the importance of having a culture around practicality and around what works for your organization, right? Because if you can speak to that, and it's not just some, oh yeah, do whatever you want, we just test to test, but hey, this is what we're testing, these are why we're making these decisions, and it's intentional. I think that's a very different thing than people just going wild using Playwright to, make a AI pizza ordering service.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's true. It's sort of a double-edged sword, right? If you are opinionated, then chances are someone's not going to like your opinion. Yeah.
I honestly, I love it. I also wish that testing frameworks had more opinions, because then it would be easier to guide people to what we think are the right choices. But at the end of the day, right, there is no right way of implementing a test. There is just what is practical and what works for an organization. We're almost at time. And so something that we did not get to talk to, because we had too much fun today, apparently, Philip, was these solutions at scale. And honestly, it's really good that we didn't touch on that, because I think we could do a whole webinar on just solutions at scale. It's been 6 months since we've done one of these, Philip. What I'm going to ask of you right now on this live stream in front of whoever's watching is, no, not another 6 months. How dare you? Is can we commit to doing a webinar together on, Playwright, Cypress, solutions at scale, where we just kind of walk through what we see around different, different attributes around what at scale means to organizations, and things that folks should consider when they are leveraging these solutions. Does that work for you?
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that. I don't know, like, let's discuss the dates. I think in 2 weeks might be good. Maybe in 3 weeks, we'll see.
Cool. It's like we know each other. We can communicate outside of this moment in time.
Yeah.
Well, this has been super fun. Thank you for having me. How do you normally do like an outro? Like, do you like put on some music? Like you just
smash that like button and subscribe, something like that. No.
Yeah, where's that button? Is it here? Because we're on YouTube. Do you do one of these? It's above you.
You can do the dance, the whole Macarena.
We're doing the Macarena now. That's this one, right?
I don't know.
And then the hip one.
I don't know.
Right. I'm gonna keep doing the Macarena until we leave.
Yeah, that's great. That's how I do the outros. They're really awkward. They don't make sense. I just start waving at the screen and saying goodbye.
Back.
All right.
I'm coming all the way back.
You can.
Still haven't left yet. Everyone's missing the hips.
All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for coming. See you next time.